Second 2020 Westfield State Rep Candidate Debate. I am Lisa Oxen, a founding member of the Westfield Taxpayers Association. We are proud to host this forum, and we hope that it will help you learn more about the candidates that you will be voting for this November. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Westfield Bank, and we'd like to thank Westfield Community Access Television and the guys who make this possible, Pete Cowles and Kenny Stomsky. Today's debate will be moderated by Hope Tremblay, editor of the Westfield News, and Patrick Berry, co-host of Mass Appeal and a former owner of the Westfield News Group.
The format of tonight's forum is as follows. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement as well as another 2 for a closing statement. Each question will be asked of every candidate, who will have 1 minute to answer. Each candidate has a flag that can be used to signal they would like a 30-second follow-up after all candidates have had a chance to answer the question. Flags may be used only once per question, but more than once during the candidate forum. Moderators may limit rebuttals to keep questions on track. Your candidates are Democrat Matt Garlow, Independent Compassionate Conservative Ethan Flaherty, and Republican Kelly Pease.
Good evening, candidates. It is time for your opening statements. Mr. Garlow, we will start with you. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Matt Garlow, and as the Democrat for State Rep in Westfield, I kindly ask for your vote on November 3rd or before. Early voting begins October 17th, so there is no time to waste in making sure you have a plan to cast your vote this year. I've learned a lot over the last 6 months or so, and I want everyone in Westfield to know that I will only continue to learn and listen more as your state rep. I'm here because I have the experience and the education to get this done, and I am also very knowledgeable about our hometown, my hometown, and I only want to learn more. The people who I've been knocking doors with and the people who I've been on the phone with and discussing issues with in backyard meetings in this interesting campaigning summer know that I am only willing to learn more. This was never something I plotted from afar, but rather something that I was inspired to do from taking action right away when I returned home from college. I had missed a lot of big things happening in Westfield that pertained to our future, and I wanted to find a way to be involved with them going forward. From knocking doors with Senator Vilas to volunteering with other campaigns in the area, I have definitely learned a lot and only want to learn more. For the second time, I've come here knowing I may not have many advocates in the room, but I am happy that the Westfield Taxpayers Association has put this event on, and I want every voter in Westfield to know that I will never shy away from an opponent or a battle about an issue for my hometown, whether it is in here in Westfield or in Boston. So for those reasons, I ask for your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Flaherty, you're next. You have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ethan Flaherty, your independent candidate running to represent the people of Westfield and Boston. First off, I want to thank the Taxpayers Association and everyone involved with making this event a reality. From the very beginning, it's been extremely important for me to stay away from the divisive party politics and the influences of special interests. Like me, 59% of voters in town are independent or third party. I'm running to represent and serve the people and businesses of Westfield, not political parties and interest groups. The job of a representative is first to be responsive to the people, so I take pride in how I treat people. When someone has a question for me or needs help with something, I take pride in being compassionate towards them, respectful, and thoroughly addressing whatever it may be. I treat everyone as an equal and seek an opportunity to learn and potentially make a difference in someone's life. and I think the people that have talked to me would vouch for that. I've been going to college since I was 16 years old and taking extra classes so that I have the ability to take time off to start the journey of serving our city as your state rep. Currently, I'm lucky enough to spend about 30 hours a week as a tutor for two great kids, a kindergartner and a 7th grader, and one of their parents is a teacher. So I understand what it's like for the parents and kids going through this pandemic and the online schooling. I'm an Eagle Scout, and every day try to live by the positive values and qualities that they taught me. My Young Voter Advisory Board has been helpful in leading the very successful efforts to increase local involvement for young people. I have over 10 years experience working on city council and mayoral campaigns, so I know the issues and what your priorities are in the State House. I hope that I answer your questions during this forum, and I urge you to check out my website and social media at Ethan for Westfield for more information on my positions and plans. At the end of tonight's forum, I'm going to ask for your support and for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Mr. Pease, you're next. You have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Hello. First, I'd like to thank the Taxpayer Association for sponsoring and Channel 15 for hosting this event again. And I'd also like to thank the moderators for taking time out and the citizens of Westfield who are watching tonight to learn more about us. And I'd like to thank Matt and Ethan. And Ethan, last time you thanked me for my service, and now I'd like to congratulate you on becoming an Eagle Scout. That's a big accomplishment. You should be very proud. I'm Kelly Pease, candidate for state representative. I have 20 years of experience in the military, working across military services and various countries to accomplish the mission. Having served our state senator, I understand the inner workings of the State House and how to support you when you run into bureaucratic roadblocks. But I'm not a politician. I have learned how to work with a variety of people over my lifetime, and that experience will help as I navigate the State House with all the politicians. I will advocate for you, the people of Westfield, to get more for roads, schools, and clean water, but not by raising taxes, but by reallocating funds in the budget to take care of Westfield's basic needs. I will make you proud to have me as your representative, and I will commit to having a district office in Westfield, and I will hold regular office hours throughout the city so you can come and talk and share your concerns with me. I bring experience to this position from my military service, having a bachelor degree in political science from Westfield State, a master of law degree from Western New England University, being a legislative aide, a homeowner who pays property taxes, and as someone who has a son in 3rd grade at Southampton Road Elementary School. If you elect me, I will bring the experience to Beacon Hill, and the only thing I promise, I will work hard for you in the city of Westfield and Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. For your first question, we will start with Mr. Flaherty. And remember, you will each have 60 seconds to answer. The question, if elected, where would you locate your Westfield office, and how would you engage with your constituents?
Okay. I'm guessing that I would locate my Westfield office somewhere in the downtown area. I currently work at an office in Cherry Street, so that's kind of a central location for everybody. The question was, how would I interact with people?
How would you engage with your constituents?
How would I engage with the constituents? So I'd certainly set up times regular during the day that they could meet with me. Of course, during the pandemic, it's a little bit harder to meet with large groups of people in person, but my email and phone are always open, and I'll be going to all the events as I have been and meeting with everybody that I can. After getting into office, I would spend time contacting other reps and senators and starting to enhance those relationships. I'll meet with Mayor Humison, key department heads, and many boards and commissions to enhance relationships with them and let them know that I'm available when needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question for you?
Yes, please.
If elected, where would you locate your Westfield office, and how would you engage with your constituents?
Well, I'm not sure where I would locate my Westfield office, and since I had that in my opening statement, I did not know that question was coming. I just want to let everybody know, But you'd have to look around at rental spaces. But I would definitely have it in the city, and the legislative aid that a representative is given would be manning that office every day, even when I'm in Boston, to answer constituent issues or concerns, as I did as a Senate aide. When somebody reach out, you'd contact an agency or department with what the issue was, to have them either contact that person directly or get the answer for them. Now, how I would interact with the community, as I mentioned, I would hold regular office hours throughout the city. I'm looking at not just down here, maybe at the library, at the senior center, but probably trying to find someplace on the north side of town as well to reach out to the citizens up there that would like to come out and talk to me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garlow, would you like me to repeat that for you?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
I would certainly seek to rent an office downtown, just a central location that everyone can hopefully make it to, even accessible by public transportation, and that is just what makes most sense to me. Living on Montgomery Road, I don't think that being up towards there would be a good idea, but at the same time, I think I would bring a new level of engagement, especially in this era of COVID, online via social media, where I can speak with anyone at any time, whether they can physically make it to a place or not. At the same time, during this COVID area, as I mentioned in my intro, I've been having a lot of backyard meetings and whatnot with constituents who have questions about me, questions about Westfield and my plans, and I would absolutely continue that going forward. Things like the farmers market are over, but any public places like that are also great areas to meet, and I would be happy to meet the public anytime at those events.
For this question, Mr. Pease, you will go first. Each of you will have 60 seconds to reply. Ranked choice voting is on the ballot this year. Using ranked choice voting can have a significant effect on the outcome of any race with 3 or more candidates like this one. Please share your position on ranked choice voting and the impact it could have if it were in place for this race. Mr. Pease, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Well, first of all, this is a complicated issue and one that I've gone back and forth on, because in the beginning I always thought, you get one vote, you vote for the best qualified person, and that's it. But if you vote yes on this question, then it gets a little more complicated, because you could have multiple counting of the ballots before you get to the winner of over 50%. But also implementing ranked choice voting could have an impact on the 2 major parties in this country that have total control over our political system. The 2 major parties, and I'm one of the parties, but they do get all the big money in the special interest groups. Where if more people felt their vote would still count if they cast that ballot for who they really wanted, then that might, let them vote for the Libertarian Green Party or Independent Party. And maybe their voice would be heard more, and also the special interest groups might not be having as much of an effect in the end.
Thank you. Mr. Garlow, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Ranked choice voting is on the ballot this year. Using ranked choice voting can have a significant effect on the outcome of any race with 3 or more candidates like this one. Please share your position on ranked choice voting and the impact it could have if it were in place for this particular race.
I believe it's something that both Westfield and Massachusetts would like to give a shot, and we'll see at the end of this election whether that is true or not. But I hear a lot, especially in my own generation of voters, that they're tired of picking between the 2 of the lesser evils, or feeling like their vote for the candidate they truly want won't count at the end of the day. So having a 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4 even going further down, ranking your choices, only assures that your vote will be counted. Now, I'm absolutely receptive to any concerns as far as implementing this would go with other members of our community, but in this race, I think it would assure that everyone's voice really does count, and also that at the end of the day, you don't have to pick between the lesser of 2 evils or anything like that. So I think it's something we give a shot, and I trust our poll workers to learn to definitely develop their skills in sorting this out.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, you're next with 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I'm all right. All right. I recently actually took a class on elections and how voting systems can impact electoral outcomes. So studying this specific form of ranked choice, I know that it doesn't always exactly work out as intended. I do support relooking at our voting, and we do know how the effects of our current voting system create these two parties, and it doesn't really help many people, and there are ways to get a more representative vote. So I do support relooking at them, but I don't support this form specifically. I would be looking at more of a modified board account type thing. As for affecting this race, it could certainly help someone who doesn't get necessarily the most votes going through the second round of resorting and such. So I think that it would probably help me in this race. It could bring in people from either sides, would put me as their second choice, and I'd probably get a lot of votes in the second round, so it could help me in this race. But
Thank you. Mr. Pease, you'd like to raise your flag and have 30 seconds additional?
Yes. First of all, I would like to say that, at the moment I am inclined to vote in favor of question 2. And, I'm going to continue to do some research and see how it's worked in other states, and I'll make my decision. But no matter how the citizens vote, I will be in favor of their choice. The other thing, I'm sure the city clerk's office will not be in favor of it. This is going to be a lot more work for them. But again, if it gives us more choices and the person gets to, it can raise up the lower parties that people do like, but they're afraid that they'll be wasting their vote, then I think it's something that we should try. And it's not involved in the presidential election at all, this ballot question.
Thank you very much.
This question will go to Mr. Garlow first. It's kind of a lengthy one. Last week, you were sent information about the Coles Bridge. What is your opinion about how the state has handled this bridge, whose replacement project was reviewed as far back as 1996, initiated in 2005, and whose 2018 structural appraisal was, quote, basically intolerable, requiring high priority of replacement? If elected, what would you do about it?
Well, of course, we all agree in Westfield that the state needs to respect our values, whether it be infrastructure, schools, our water infrastructure, a bit more seriously. And I believe that I would be an asset in contacting places like the DOT and other places in control of issues like this to push them along. We heard the range of years mentioned in the question right there, and I would just like to say that this project is laid out by the DOT and out to bid right now, and we just need a representative who can make sure that even in this era of structural deficits to the budget due to COVID, that this still makes it on one of the upcoming budgets, because we have essentially been promised it for that long, and we have done what we have needed to do, and we just need someone to continue to usher places like the DOT and continue to remind them that that this needs to get done no matter when it gets done, hopefully very soon in the next budget or the one after that. And that is why we need to form partnerships at the state level, and I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Your time is up. Next, Mr. Flaherty, would you like me to repeat it?
I think I'm all set.
Okay,
Thank you. So all the bridges are state projects, right? And they get inspected and such, but bridges don't fall into disrepair overnight, and the Cowles Bridge certainly isn't alone in being in bad shape. I believe around 10% of the bridges in the state are actually structurally not okay. This happens because we don't maintain them properly and we don't prioritize our spending well. The money that we pay in gas tax, excise tax, RMV revenue, all of that, a lot of it gets diverted to away from roads and infrastructure where it should be going, and it gets diverted to the general fund and to the MBTA, which doesn't really help us out here in the West. It really mostly helps the East, where they have those public transportation options. Another thing to consider is that we pay around twice as much as other areas for construction because we don't allow real competition with prevailing wage law. So if we got rid of prevailing wage law, we'd be able to fix twice as many bridges just by having that competition. Overall, the biggest problem that allows things like the Cowles Bridge to happen is irresponsible spending and lack of priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, would you like the question read?
No, I think I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
So while I've been out the last 6 months meeting the voters of Westfield, I've heard many complaints about the bridge, especially from the residents living in Ward 5A and 4B. A few weeks ago, I was asked by a voter if I knew what was going on with the Cowles Bridge, and since it had the barriers up for over 2 years and no work being done on it. So I contacted the State District 2 office and talked to Jim Hoy. And it just happens that the bid has been awarded to the ETL Construction, and the pre-construction meeting is scheduled for October 20th. This is about a 4-year project for the new bridge to be put in place. I know from my experience working as a legislative aide in our district at the State House, and whenever I had a question from a constituent, I would contact the appropriate state office and follow up with the best information available back to the person who asked me that question. And as your representative, I promise you that with any questions or concerns you have, I will make the inquiry and get back to you in a timely manner.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll start with Mr. Flaherty. Again, each of you will have 60 seconds. The City of Westfield, via the Westfield Flood Control Commission, will need state monetary assistance for the upcoming U.S. Natural Resources Conservation Service rehabilitations of both the Armbrook and Powder Mill Brook flood control dams. The city must cover 35% of the costs, plus all permits and land acquisition via easements and/or eminent domain. The city also needs to rehabilitate the Little River levee to reach compliance with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. How seriously do you view the risk of flooding in Westfield? How will you work with the city and state to procure funding to assist the city with these desperately needed and long overdue critical infrastructure repairs? Mr. Flaherty, you have 60 seconds.
Okay. I think the risk is pretty big based on information that I've gotten from Mr. Giguere and the Flood Control Commission. We've been lucky with not having any major flooding like in 1955. But we have had some problems, you might remember in 2007 or in 2011 when Home Depot and the Plaza flooded. But because Westfield is such a large floodplain, it's a huge problem that many of our dams are at an unacceptable level. There are currently about 2,000 structures in the floodplain with about $50 million worth of value. So right now there's no funding from the state, but I support and will fight for all applicable special grants at the state level to help mitigate the costs on our city. I support the efforts to hand over the ownership of Powder Mill and Armbrook dams to the state as recommended by Mr. Giguere and the Flood Control Commission. The Westfield Flood Control Commission is small but very important, and I would like to see them have more autonomy and power to help protect the people and property in Westfield. Anyone, and yeah, that's what we got.
Mr. Pease, you're next with 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
The City of Westfield, via the Westfield Flood Control Commission, will need state monetary assistance for the upcoming U.S. Natural Resources Conservation Service rehabilitations of both the Armbrook and Powder Mill Brook flood control dams. The city must cover 35% of costs, plus all permits and land acquisition via easements and/or eminent domain. The city also needs to rehabilitate the Little River levee to reach compliance with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. How seriously do you view the risk of flooding in Westfield? How will you work with the city and state to procure funding to assist the city with these desperately needed and long overdue critical infrastructure repairs?
Well, I think it's a very big concern. I mean, just because we haven't had a major flood since 1955, and Ethan had mentioned a few other issues since then, but not like 1955, that we have to get this up to speed. And plus, we can't give it back. We can't let the state control of it because, again, there are only 5 flood-controlled dams in the entire Commonwealth that are not owned by the state, and Westfield has 2 of them, and that puts an added burden on us as taxpayers of Westfield. So we need to get it repaired, and you're right, the state is, or the federal's going to pay 65%, and we have to pay 35%, which we can't afford. So I will have to advocate for Westfield as a representative down at the State House to get the needed funding so we could get this project complete and then pass it off to them. And then also we have to get the Little River project back up to speed so the Corps of Engineers can also deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. Pease. Mr. Garlow, you have 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is definitely a very serious issue, and all of us here are taking it seriously and would, but I just would like to say that at the amount that is required and the fact that all 3 of these, the Little River Levee, Armbrook Dam, and Powder Mill Dam, all need help. This is not an overnight fix, that is for sure. It'll take 3 tiers of cooperation and communication, and that is city, state, and federal levels. It goes all the way up to our representatives in Congress, and given our congressional delegation and our other representative in the state legislature, I believe I would be the best to form these paths to a partnership that really can get this project on the rails and absolutely get us into a position to hand this off to the state, because having 2 out of the 5 municipally owned dams in one town, and when the whole state has 5, is completely unfair, and it is absolutely a burden. But the fact is, Westfield needs to catch up before we can hand them off.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, this next question begins with you. There have been bills proposed recently aimed at adding vaccines to the required schedule for public school attendance, requiring vaccinations for private schools, and removing religious exemptions for vaccine mandates. While those proposals did not succeed, it's likely there will be future attempts. What is your position on mandatory vaccination and other public health mandates?
Well, I believe that parents should have the choice, especially when it comes to the flu vaccine. You know, having a child in 3rd grade at Southampton Road Elementary School, I'm concerned with anything that's mandated, especially if it's not proven to be totally effective. You know, I agree with the chickenpox vaccine and others throughout time that have helped eliminate disease completely. And my wife and I, we have our son at Riley, and we give him a flu shot every year. So for us, it isn't a big deal. As a matter of fact, in Westfield, last year, 81% of the children received a flu vaccination, the highest in the country. So I don't think it's a real big issue for this state, but I think it's key that we have the medical and religious exemptions. I did talk to a parent who was concerned about the mandate. She gave her 3 children the flu vaccine every year, and last year one of them had a bad allergic reaction. While the parent should get the medical exemption, I feel that especially for the vaccine that is a hit or miss like the flu shot, it should be a parent's choice.
Thank you. Mr. Garlow, the same question. You have 60 seconds.
So the medical exemptions and the religious exemptions, the attempts to rid this mandate of those did fail, as mentioned, and those are still on the table. So anyone who has medical or religious concerns can still bypass this. We have to understand at this time, though, that 2020, this school year, this era of COVID, is unlike anything anyone has experienced, whether it be in Westfield or Massachusetts. We have our governor today speaking on how he's already preparing to expand hospital capacities because of what is expected to come this winter with coupling COVID and flu season together. It's something none of us have ever seen before. This wasn't a legislative proceeding. It was a mandate by the governor. As I said, that still includes the religious and medical exemptions. So I see this as a community-based solution that we don't have to overwhelm our hospitals or cause outbreaks in our schools because of it. And those concerned about it can absolutely still opt out.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, the same question.
Thank you. I think that in general, people's medical decisions should be made between them and their doctor, not by government bureaucrats. The only medical decisions that should even be considered to be mandated are those that, of course, first, affect other people and are public health oriented. They have a history of being safe and effective. They can't be unfunded, and the consequences for other people have to be substantial. If the flu shot mandate was about public health, then why is it required for students and not the staff who also make up a large part of the school and are typically at higher risk? I certainly understand the desire to keep unprotected and potentially positive people away from vulnerable populations, so I support continuing to provide educations online for those who can't go back. Overall, I think that we should be very weary of mandating medical decisions in order to receive education and only ever consider it if it's really made with public safety in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. We're going to start with you Mr. Garlow, you have 30 seconds.
I would just like to first point out that this is absolutely a public safety and public health issue. As we have schools considering going back to school, it's not just an individual choice. It is affecting every student in that class. When you send someone in there without a religious or medical reason for exemption from a flu shot, it is putting everyone at risk in that class. And also, 81% of students receiving the vaccine was the statistic at the state level, not Westfield. So we really do need to just a time where we need to band together, and if it's not for you, you are exempt.
We're coming right back. Oh, Mr. Flaherty, you have 30 seconds.
I would ask, why then is it required for students and not for staff? And also, if it's so public health minded and it's about public safety, then why are there religious exemptions allowed? I'm not saying that I think that we should get rid of religious exemptions at the moment, but certainly for things that are public health oriented, you wouldn't want people opting out because of their religion. Thank you.
Thank you all. Again, Mr. Garlow, we're going to come back to you for the next question. You'll start first. Legislation has been proposed in the past to limit guns and gun accessories. Do you believe that certain types of guns and/or accessories, including sound reduction devices, should be banned by the Commonwealth? Additionally, what is your position on gun-free zones? You have 60 seconds.
So, especially with the ongoing budget discussions and things that are much more important than these issues at hand, I believe enforcing the laws on the books in Massachusetts is more than acceptable at this time. We're a leader in gun safety and gun training, other things like that. I grew up in a household with guns my entire life. They've been there since day one, and I've been around them since day one and will continue to be. I also live right around the corner from the Sportsman's Club. I understand Westfield residents' desire to hunt and carry when they are licensed, and as far as gun-free zones, there will always need to be some, such as school areas and things like that. But I guess specifically, I would have to address those specifically on the exact ones that they are. But at this time, I don't see those issues as priorities, and I see budget season and Westfield's fair share as our priorities in the legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, coming to you with 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
It was suppressors and gun-free zones, correct?
Sorry?
It was suppressors and gun-free zones.
Yes.
Okay. First off, I'll start by saying that I support our Second Amendment, and I think it's absolutely fundamental to our country, and I support safe and legal firearm ownership. I do believe in taking steps to ensure that good people have access to firearms and bad people don't. On the question of suppressors and gun-free zones, I think it's most important to look if it actually has any effect on gun crime, or if it's just another, however well-intentioned, if it's just another burden for legal gun owners. I haven't seen the evidence to support that suppressors, that limiting suppressors or having gun-free zones affects gun crime. But my ears are open either way for ways to improve safety. For me, the most important thing to consider is whether or not a law will have real effects on gun crime and how much it infringes on our right to own these tools. Most of the time when looking at statistics, I find that the problem is usually gang-related or suicide-related, both of which should be addressed as separate and very serious topics in their own right. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts on guns and those kinds of things, then check out my website or shoot me an email and I'll gladly talk to you.
Thank you, Mr. Pease. You have 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm okay. I'm a strong Second Amendment advocate for legal gun owners like myself. When talking about the Second Amendment and our rights to bear arms, it is important to understand that you cannot legislate morality. Adding more gun control laws are not going to stop criminals from getting guns illegally. Legal gun owners abide by the laws. I grew up around guns my whole life, and I've learned to respect them and use them in a safe manner. This respect and safe use of firearms was also reinforced during my 20-year military career. There was a reason that it was the Second Amendment and not the 9th or 10th in our Bill of Rights. It comes right after freedom of speech, religion, and the press. I do not believe there should be any further laws that restrict legal gun ownership and think some of the laws have gone too far. If new laws are proposed against illegal use or criminal activities where guns are used, then I would probably not have a problem supporting those laws, but not laws that restrict legal gun ownership.
Okay, Mr. Flaherty, this question, we're going to start with you. Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution states that the people shall have the right to clean air and water. To date, 15 different PFAS compounds have been detected in water from Barnes Aquifer near Westfield Municipal Wells 7 and 8, including both long and short chain PFAS. Do you believe the water from that location, once treated by granular activated carbon filtration, is clean?
I think that's a complicated question, and right now the DEP regulations for PFAS, the thresholds just went down to 20 parts per trillion, and for the ones that we're testing, we're meeting those regulations. Our water has been criminally polluted, and I support the legal efforts to get damages from 3M. In the State House, I would strongly advocate for every special grant available related to the cleanup, testing, and filtration of our water and the health impacts. I've had a couple of great conversations with Councilor Kristen Mello and Westfield residents advocating for themselves, and strongly support RAF's goals of ensuring clean and safe water for everyone. I will always be advocating for further research into the health impacts and recovering money from those responsible. And the city of Westfield shouldn't be completely on the hook for dealing with the filtration and health impacts when other players are responsible. So overall, I take our environment very seriously and will always advocate for safety and responsibility.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, you're up. Would you like me to repeat that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution states that the people shall have the right to clean air and water. To date, 15 different PFAS compounds have been detected in the water from Barnes Aquifer near Westfield Municipal Wells 7 and 8, including long and short chain PFAS. Do you believe the water from that location, once treated by granular activated carbon filtration, is clean?
Well, let me start off by saying, having attended a PFAS task force hearing on Beacon Hill while I was working as a legislative aide, I learned a lot about the issue and will be better positioned to work with the Baker administration to be appointed to that task force. And I will also join the PFAS caucus to make sure your voice is heard in Boston. Now you're talking about the strings that are being tested, where they only test for the 6 PFAS compounds right now coming through the filters, and they test great, as Ethan had mentioned. So they're doing well. We haven't tested for the others, so we don't really know. So that's probably something that we need to look at down the road. But right now, we're getting good news from those filters. They're not having any readings, and that's really good for pregnant women, nursing mothers, or infants. I mean, they are vulnerable. And getting that $200,000 grant from the state just at the end of September will help in moving forward and maybe doing some further tests.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garland, the same question for you. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution states that the people shall have the right to clean air and water. To date, 15 different PFAS compounds have been detected in water from Barnes Aquifer near Westfield Municipal Wells 7 and 8, including both long and short chain PFAS. Do you believe the water from that location, once treated by granular activated carbon filtration, is clean?
So I would start answering that by saying no one on this area right now on these podiums is the be-all, end-all of saying it is clean or it is not. And that is why I, too, have been speaking with Councilor Kristen Mello, Senator Vilas, even Chris Clark, who's away at college right now, has been a steadfast fighter for our water, and many others in Westfield about these issues. I'd like to thank Councilor Mello and Senator Vilas for their recent efforts in securing these grants. It's a gradual battle, and I'd be happy to be part of that and continue it in the State House. I, too, would join the PFAS task force, as I mentioned in the first debate. And just as the state DEP just lowered the limit of PFAS compounds from 70 parts per trillion to 20 parts per trillion to what is acceptable, I would also advocate that they start testing for more, because as the experts, who are not me, who are like Kristen Mello, Councilor Kristen Mello, would say that there are many more that should be tested for.
Thank you.
All right, the next question, Mr. Pease, you will start. Again, you'll each get 60 seconds. This is a long one, so please bear with me. In December 1989, the chief elected officials in the cities of Westfield and Holyoke, the towns of East Hampton and Southampton, along with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, signed the Memorandum of Agreement for Barnes Aquifer Protection, an intergovernmental compact creating a standing Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee with the authority to review and comment on developments of regional impact in the aquifer recharge area and to develop a regional aquifer protection strategy. In the spring of 2018, the City of Westfield refused to renew their participation, effectively ending this Intergovernmental Advisory Committee and its work protecting an irreplaceable multi-community natural resource. What is your position about the city's responsibility for protecting this shared, vital, and unfortunately polluted resource? What are you willing to do to help correct this situation?
Well, thank you. That's an interesting question. I mean, because, as I did research into this, I did notice that the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee has not been active since 2018 in April. And again, it's a non-political advisory committee that basically just provided input to authorities. It's much like the example is this: they provided input for Holyoke when the Hampton Ponds Dunkin' Donuts development went in to the decision makers in Westfield about how the impact would be on the aquifer. And I also talked to Charles Darlin, who was the former chair of the advisory committee and a retired water engineer for the city of Westfield. He felt that, they did a good job informing the cities and towns of potential impacts, and a new agreement should be considered. But I don't think it's my place as the representative. I'm not getting elected to a city position. If I was, I would make a decision. But I think it's up to our leadership whether they want to be part of this committee or not.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garlow, same question to you. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
In December 1989, the chief elected officials in the cities of Westfield and Holyoke, along with the towns of East Hampton and Southampton and the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, signed the Memorandum of Agreement for Barnes Aquifer Protection, an intergovernmental compact creating a standing Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee with the authority to review and comment on developments of regional impact in the aquifer recharge area and to develop a regional aquifer protection strategy. In the spring of 2018, the City of Westfield refused to renew their participation, effectively ending this Intergovernmental Advisory Committee and its work protecting an irreplaceable multi-community natural resource. What is your position about the city's responsibility for protecting this shared, vital, and unfortunately polluted resource? And what are you willing to do to help correct this situation?
So while this organization is intergovernmental and also involved by the city and not anyone in the state legislative position, I know I would be more than happy to engage in discussions of how we can get back into this agreement, or at least find out why the city decided not to opt back in. Because whether it be the advisory committee or it be a PFAS task force out in Boston in the legislature, I see these partnerships as some of the most valuable things we can getting insight from out of town and across the whole state when we are in a struggling spot with our water. There's not too many voices there's never too many voices that we can hear on subjects like this, and that committee, as well as the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, is an asset to our entire region, so I would want Westfield to be included in every bit of that. If it has run its course according to the city, I would like to find out why and hopefully get it back up and going and get Westfield back involved.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, you're last with 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question? Thank you.
BAPAC was certainly an important group, and with their last meeting being in 2018, I certainly support its reformation or transformation, and I'd encourage all the affected communities to come together to make this happen. I'd encourage city and town governments to work with me and other like-minded representatives to address this matter at a state level. Article 97, as we already mentioned, of the Massachusetts Constitution guarantees you the right to clean water and clean air, and you can count on me to defend your rights. Right now, the aquifer supplies about 1.2 billion gallons of water to 60,000 people, and so as for the responsibility of the city, it's the city's responsibility as well as the state's responsibility as well as the federal government's responsibility to protect that and ensure that we get clean, safe, reliable drinking water.
Thank you. Oh, go right ahead.
Yes, I just want to make sure I'm clear that it is a city job to decide whether they want to be part of this, and it happened that the old agreement expired and they just chose not to renew it, is my understanding. As a private citizen, I would advocate for this, but not as a state rep. I would not get involved in the city's decision on something local like this. But as a citizen, I believe absolutely why not have a non-political advisory board that gives you advice on the impacts to the aquifer.
Very good.
Thank you. Mr. Garlow, we will start with you. You all have 60 seconds. Charter schools have become a popular choice among many parents. Some argue there's little oversight by the state and that by choosing to have students attend charter schools, money is unfairly removed from the public school system, leaving fewer resources for the remaining students. What is your position on charter schools? And what, if anything, would you change about how this educational option is administered by the state?
So I would just like to be clear in saying that charter school tuitions in any form are absolutely taking money away from our funding for public education in Westfield. And I would make that clear to taxpayers, I would make that clear to educators, and I would make that clear to parents sending their students to public schools who don't want to see music cut or don't want to see larger class sizes than they already are. No, we don't need one in town to necessarily lose money from this. Northampton is a great example of that. They send over 200 students out of town to charter schools, and that guts nearly $2.5 million away from what they receive from the state and through Chapter 70 and other sources. I'm a Westfield Public Schools alum from start to finish, and that is absolutely where my loyalty lies. I'll always listen and hear reasons of parents, students that would like to attend elsewhere, but I would certainly work in the state to see that charter schools don't take so much money, charter school tuitions don't take so much money away from our public funds.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, you're next. Would you like me to repeat it?
I'm all set, thank you.
Thanks.
Like most people, I believe parents should have choices in their kids' schooling. It's our obligation to provide free and appropriate education to all kids. Everyone deserves an education suited for their needs, and I don't think that we can honestly say that we're providing that. Having competition in schooling is big for me. We need to be looking forward to what changes we should make to fulfill our need for a high-class 21st century education system. So I'm not going to be a puppet to any political party, union, or interest group. And with education, my priority will 100% always be providing the best education that we can for every kid. As of right now, the state reimburses us for money lost to charter schools. And look, in schooling, we need to be treating it like any other profession. We need to be rewarding those people and practices that do good, improving those that do mediocre, and getting rid of those that perform poorly. If charter schools can provide a more appropriate education and give parents and kids a choice in what kind of school that they receive, then of course I support having those options available. If you want to hear more about my positions on this or hear more specifics, check out my website or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to talk with you.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, you have 60 seconds for the question.
Thank you. Well, in Westfield, there are families who pursue alternative education opportunities, from homeschooling, faith-based education, and charter schools. And the state supports those family choices, and so do I. Charter schools were created under the Education Reform Act of 1983, but public school funding was not impacted for those first few years. As your representative, I will work aggressively to fight for higher reimbursement rates that are impacted by students attending charter schools. We have some incredibly talented teachers, but they are not only hampered by the lack of the reimbursement for charter schools, but one of the biggest complaints I've heard talking to teachers and administrators is unfunded mandates, especially when related to special education programs. At the state level, we need to stop mandating new programs that are paid for the first year or two, and then the funding goes away, but the mandate does not. I will work with school administrators, the school committee, to represent them at the State House.
Very good. Mr. Flaherty, we'll start with...
Mr. Garlow.
Mr. Garlow, you have 30 seconds.
As Mr. Pease began to point out there, I would just like to point out that full reimbursements for these choices are a fantasy, and that's definitely a fiction, and that's something that I would fight to get more of too, so that people can still have their choices. But the fact that we get fully reimbursed when hundreds of kids would have the opportunity to go to charter schools is not true by any means. We had to dip into the cash account this year to save programs like art and certain other staffers in the schools, and I'd like to see us do that when we have more kids going to charter school, because it wouldn't be possible.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, you have 30 seconds.
Charter schools still outperform public schools, and they're highly desired by parents and students. Over time, they do result in a little bit of money going away from public school districts, but the state currently offsets about 2 years of that money. I support increased availability of career readiness, vocational, technical, STEM, and early college programs. And for me, the question is always, how do we improve education so that parents don't feel like they need to transfer their kids to a different school?
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Flaherty, we're going to come back to you for the next question.
Sure.
What pieces of legislation that are currently pending in the Mass Legislature are most important to you? Do you support them or not, and why?
Look, the agenda resets every 2 years, so right now the only critical piece of legislation is related to the FY21 budget and COVID. I would certainly support passing this balanced budget as soon as possible. Going forward, I would like to see an annual budget process that gives cities and towns firm budget numbers by the end of March each year. Right now, cities and towns are in limbo every year, having to jerk around their own budgets and employees while waiting for firm numbers from the state. Doing this isn't easy, but with the right laws and creative accounting, there are ways to do this. State aid for cities and towns represents about 15% of the state budget. It moves a little bit year to year and generally increases a little bit. Stabilization accounts could be used to buffer enough money to allow the state to give out firm numbers in time to satisfy the state-mandated city and town budget deadlines. I'd also like to see serious progress made in the K-12 education with particular attention to special needs, English language learners, and expansion of the educational choices to include more opportunities like work readiness, vocational technical, STEM, and early college programs.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you very much. Well, there's two bills that stand out to me right away, and one is the act of to reform the police standards. One, I think they tried to rush something through too fast, and also the qualified immunity for the police. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of good police officers, and I think if they want to add some training in for the police officers, then I don't have a problem with that. But I think these bills go too far to the detriment of our police officers that are out there putting their life on the line every day and trying to do the best job they can. And having served as a part-time police officer, I mean, I went to the Agawam Reserve Academy, but they teach you there. You know, you make a 1-second decision, and it could be in court for 6 months or years. And you're out there, you don't know what that traffic stop is every time you approach a car. And the other one is the transportation bill. I am totally against raising the gas tax and trying to get more money in. They raise enough on the gas tax already, and we pay enough at the pump, which will hurt even the lower person. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Garlow, you're next. 60 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What pieces of legislation are currently pending in the Mass Legislature are most important to you? Do you support them or not, and why? You have 60.
So my strong opinion here is that if anything is of greater importance to anyone here than making sure Westfield gets its fair share in the upcoming budgets, then that is a problem in itself. I will not be writing my dream bills upon getting there because I will be working on the fiscal year 22 budget as the legislature now is still attempting to finish this year's, and then we'll be working on the next. I've spoken with John Velas a lot lately, who has said in roughly 5 years he has never been so busy with the budget, and frankly that's how it should be, because there's about $3 to $7 billion of structural deficits right now, and that may not be a number that improves in the next one. So anything other than making sure Westfield gets its fair share for education, water, of course, roads, anything of the like, is something that my time shouldn't be spent on upon getting there until we can get past this disaster.
Thank you. It's actually time for our closing statements, and we're going to start with Mr. Pease. You each have 2 minutes.
Thank you for having this event so the people of Westfield can see the candidates, learn more about us, and make an informed decision. As a homeowner, I understand the cost of owning a home and paying property taxes. I also have a son in 3rd grade at Southampton Road Elementary School and understand the challenges of being a parent and dealing not only with school issues, but managing child care during the COVID-19. Throughout this campaign, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of people of Westfield. I understand the issues they're concerned about, from roads, schools, water, and I will fight to get the needed funding for the infrastructure improvements in our schools. I will advocate in partnership with our state senator to get the money for our city to help with the most needed concerns, and also I'll make sure our seniors and veterans are taken care of. I'm proud to say that I'm the only candidate here who has endorsed our teachers. My wife and I trust them and the administration with our 8-year-old son's education and well-being. I will back the blue and make sure firefighters have the necessary funding they need, especially for protective equipment. With my 20 years of military experience, a bachelor's degree in political science from Westfield State, a Master of Law degree from Western New England University, And as a homeowner and a father of a child in the Westfield public school system, I know I'm the best person to represent the city of Westfield. If you vote for me, as a member of the minority party in the House of Representatives, I will serve on more committees on Beacon Hill than my opponents would. This would give the citizens of Westfield greater influence during the construction phase of bills prior to being presented on the House floor for a vote. Again, I'm not a politician, but I feel with my experience and knowledge of how the real world works, I feel I'm the best candidate for the job. I'm Kelly Pease, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd and would be humbled to be your voice in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garlow, your closing statement, please.
So what people want these days is what you see is what you get in someone representing them, and I am absolutely that. Down to Westfield, down to the local level, we are tired of divisiveness, whether that be across party or even between parties, as we've seen plenty here. We're tired of theatrics, and we want someone who can listen and learn along the way and who has the drive to be out all day and night in Westfield and also drive to Boston whenever there is a vote or a budget meeting to get our fair share and get our seat at the table. I, too, have a nephew in the school system right now who I've been helping every day at with his remote learning, and I am also recently on as a student mentor with the Westfield High School because along this campaign trail I've been looking for employment as well. So that is something I'm proud to do, and I have endorsed our teachers on this stage, on my social media, on my website, and I've also been endorsed by the teachers. I am in contact with not only teachers across the teachers union across the state, but Westfield Education Association, which is where my loyalty lies. We need someone who can look forward past short-term ideas to get things like our water finally behind us with gradual wins, as I mentioned before. And I'm definitely the candidate for that because I'll be able to form the most partnerships in Boston. I also list on my website, if you'd like to check it out, garlow4westfield.com. That's the number 4 in the middle. The committees that I would seek to join immediately. So I would have full participation on those to make sure Westfield has a voice in every one of those as well. I've been a Democrat since I've been eligible to vote, but any of my Republican friends, my Republican parents of my friends know that I am someone who will sit down, listen, and bring things to reality, and that is just what Westfield and the rest of our country needs right now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flaherty, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I hope that this forum was helpful and that I answered many of your questions. Thank you again to everyone involved with putting this event on. My goal is to independently represent Westfield and to work with colleagues in all parties to best serve the people of Massachusetts. The root causes of many of our problems are that we have a very divisive political climate, and that because of that we can't work together in a respectful manner to address the needs of our residents and businesses. With your support, we can make the dream of independent representation a reality. Again, 59% of Westfield voters are not registered Democrats or Republicans. I'll work tirelessly for the people in Westfield and guarantee that if you need to reach out to a representative for help with something, I'd be the best one to reach out to. I'll always treat the person in front of me as priority and with compassion. Aside from voting on important issues, a state rep is here to serve you in the community. The range of service is quite extensive. Recently, people have asked about things such as help with unemployment, family medical leave, COVID, roads, bridges, water, and how to best connect with the various state offices. I've spent the past months hearing from all kinds of people about the issues that they care about, and I've been studying what role a state representative has in addressing those challenges. Current politicians are putting my generation on the hook for billions and billions of dollars with no plan to pay for it and without much regard for cutting costs or seeing real improvement. I ask for you to learn more about this campaign, take a look at the Ethan for Westfield website, and reach out to me with any questions or concerns. My goal would be to be the best representative that Westfield has ever had, and that's a mighty high goal considering those that have done the job before me. I've been humbled by the support so far, and I respectfully ask for you to vote Ethan Flaherty as your next state rep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to turn it back over to Lisa from the Westfield Taxpayers Association.
Thank you, candidates, and thank you, moderators. We'd like to remind everyone that we have one last candidate forum. The state senatorial candidate of John Velas and John Kane will take place on Wednesday, October 21st at 7 p.m. I'd also like to remind you that the Westfield Taxpayers Association is promoting 3 petitions to help dedicate funds to road repair. Please visit AskWestfield.com to learn more and sign the petitions. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Pete and Kenny. And thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Westfield Bank, for making these debates possible. Don't forget to vote either by mail, early at City Hall, or in person on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you.